James and Michael thought it was just another Friday night at McDonald's, but within minutes, an argument turned deadly. A gunshot shattered the calm, and their lives in the town of Brooksville would never be the same. It was a quiet Friday night in Brooksville, the kind where streets were dimly lit and most residents had already settled into their weekend routines. The McDonald's on Main Street, a familiar landmark in the town, hummed with the usual mix of families, night shift workers, and teenagers seeking a late snack. The smell of fries and fried chicken filled the air, blending with the faint aroma of gasoline from cars idling in the drive-thru. Employees moved efficiently behind the counter, taking orders with practiced smiles, unaware that the ordinary rhythm of the evening was about to shatter. Outside, the parking lot was nearly full, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary until a man appeared, pacing aggressively near the entrance. His movements were erratic, his gaze scanning the lot with a mix of anger and urgency. Another figure, calmer and seemingly cautious, remained closer to the building, arms crossed, silently watching. At first, their interaction seemed like a typical argument, something that might flare up but quickly cool down. But tension escalated quickly. Voices rose, sharp gestures punctuated each word, and the energy in the lot shifted from casual annoyance to something dangerous. Then, without warning, chaos erupted. A single gunshot cracked through the night, cutting through the music from the restaurant's speakers and the chatter of patrons. Screams pierced the air as people ducked behind cars and scattered in every direction. Trays of food toppled, fries tumbled onto asphalt, and drinks splashed across tables. Some patrons froze, staring in shock at the man who had fallen to the ground, while others bolted toward the exit, fear propelling their movements. The shooter, or perhaps shooters, vanished almost as quickly as the violence began, leaving a scene of confusion and terror. When the police arrived minutes later, they found a scene that would haunt them: overturned chairs, shattered glass, and the lifeless body of a man who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The surviving figure, injured and dazed, was barely conscious, his eyes wide with disbelief. Witnesses, still trembling, struggled to recount events clearly, offering conflicting stories that would complicate the investigation for days to come. What should have been a routine Friday night had turned into a nightmare. The town that had prided itself on safety and familiarity was now confronted with a chilling reminder that violence could erupt anywhere, even in the most ordinary and seemingly secure places. The investigation began almost immediately after the shooting, but what should have been a straightforward case quickly turned complicated. Detectives combed the McDonald's parking lot, taking photographs, collecting evidence, and carefully cataloging every detail. The victim, a local delivery driver known for his reliability and friendly demeanor, had no known enemies, leaving officers puzzled about why anyone would target him. Surveillance cameras from the restaurant and nearby businesses were examined frame by frame, but the footage revealed only brief, blurry glimpses of the assailants' movements. The chaos of the moment made it difficult to tell how many people had been involved or how the events had unfolded so quickly. Witnesses were questioned repeatedly, yet their stories often conflicted. Some claimed they saw a single man brandishing a gun, while others insisted there were multiple vehicles involved, each moving in different directions. Employees described the argument leading up to the shooting, but their recollections varied so widely that detectives had to consider the possibility that fear and shock were distorting memories. The surviving figure, barely conscious at the scene, offered little clarity. Detectives followed tips from concerned citizens, checked local criminal records, and traced the movements of potential suspects, yet the investigation often felt like chasing shadows. Amid the confusion, small breakthroughs appeared. Security footage showed a figure leaving the scene on foot, disappearing into the surrounding streets. Financial records hinted at unusual activity in the victim's accounts, suggesting he might have been involved in something more than deliveries. Yet even these clues were fragmented and contradictory. Each step forward seemed to uncover new mysteries rather than resolve old ones. The pressure on law enforcement intensified as the public demanded swift justice, But the detectives knew the case required patience, precision, and the ability to see patterns others might overlook. The quiet town of Brooksville had been thrown into a state of anxious anticipation, its residents left to wonder if the murderer was already living among them, blending seamlessly into the everyday life they had once taken for granted. As the investigation unfolded, detectives began uncovering layers of secrets that shocked the small town of Brooksville. What initially appeared to be a simple, tragic act of violence started to reveal a deeper, more sinister story. The victim, previously thought to lead a quiet, uneventful life, was discovered to have been involved in exposing a local black market operation. Evidence suggested he had been gathering information on illicit dealings linked to the fast food franchise, a revelation that reframed the entire case. Suddenly, the murder no longer seemed random. It appeared calculated, targeted, and tied to forces operating behind a veneer of normalcy. Suspicion spread quickly among those connected to the restaurant. Employees who had seemed friendly and trustworthy were suddenly under scrutiny. Investigators uncovered financial irregularities, late-night meetings, and coded messages that hinted at hidden alliances. One former employee, in particular, drew attention for suddenly disappearing the night of the murder and returning days later with unexplained wealth. Each discovery seemed to layer the story with more complexity, suggesting that multiple people might have had motives far beyond personal grievances. The detectives also delved into the victim's personal life, uncovering relationships that had been carefully concealed. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances who had spoken fondly of him were revealed to have connections to criminal activities, ranging from minor thefts to organized operations. It became increasingly clear that the town's appearance of safety had been deceptive, and many residents had been unknowingly entangled in schemes they could neither explain nor escape. Even as evidence mounted, it seemed the more the investigators learned, the more questions arose. Digital communications hinted at premeditation, financial records revealed suspicious transactions, and witness statements conflicted more than ever. Every lead had the potential to uncover betrayal, yet also threatened to send the detectives down dead-end paths. The case had grown from a tragic night into a complex web of greed, secrecy, and hidden vendettas. Brooksville, once a town where everyone knew each other, now felt like a place where trust had vanished overnight. By the end of this phase of the investigation, it was clear that the murder at McDonald's was only the tip of the iceberg. What had started as a shocking act of violence had evolved into a tangled network of deceit and corruption, implicating individuals the community had never suspected. The detectives realized that solving the case would require unraveling a web of lies far larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and that every revelation could bring them closer to the truth or deeper into chaos. Just when detectives believed they were closing in on a suspect, the case took a shocking turn. DNA evidence collected from the scene did not match the prime suspect, immediately throwing weeks of investigation into doubt. The man who had seemed the most likely culprit now appeared to be a convenient scapegoat, chosen perhaps because of his past mistakes rather than any direct involvement in the murder. Investigators were forced to step back, reassessing every lead and every statement they had gathered. The familiar narrative that had guided them suddenly dissolved, leaving uncertainty and tension in its place. Further analysis of the crime scene revealed subtle details that had gone unnoticed in the initial rush. Footprints suggested the presence of a second person, someone who had carefully maneuvered through the chaos and disappeared without leaving a trace. Surveillance footage, once considered incomplete or irrelevant, now showed small anomalies: a shadow moving in the background, a car parked at an unusual angle, a hand briefly visible at the edge of a frame. Each clue pointed to a mastermind who had orchestrated the night with precision, someone intimately familiar with the town, the McDonald's, and the people involved. Detectives dug deeper into the lives of those closest to the victim and the suspect, uncovering connections that seemed inconsequential at first, but were now revealing a chilling pattern. Friends, co-workers, and even family members were questioned again, and inconsistencies in their statements became glaringly obvious. There were hints of long-standing grudges, hidden deals, and carefully planned acts of deception. The realization dawned that the murder was not an impulsive act of rage, but a carefully calculated crime, executed with a level of cunning that shocked even seasoned investigators. The town, meanwhile, was gripped by fear and speculation. Residents wondered how someone could manipulate events so completely without being detected, and rumors swirled faster than the police could respond. The media, sensing a dramatic twist, amplified the tension, reporting every new detail and raising questions about the identities and motives of those involved. The detectives, while under immense pressure, remained focused on connecting the dots, knowing that uncovering the second figure's identity was the key to solving the case. By the time the new lead began to crystallize, it was evident that the crime had been part of a much larger plan. The shooting at McDonald's was only one act in a series of manipulations designed to mislead, confuse, and instill fear. The town had been carefully manipulated, and every piece of evidence, every witness statement, and every hidden transaction was part of a web that extended far beyond that fateful night. The investigation was no longer just about a murder, it was a race to uncover a criminal mind that had already proven capable of outsmarting everyone around it. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, the result of painstaking analysis and tireless detective work. Surveillance footage, financial records, and subtle inconsistencies in witness statements finally pointed to a single individual, the mastermind who had orchestrated the chaos. It was someone the town had never suspected, a former employee with a grudge and a carefully cultivated plan for revenge. This person had not only planned the murder but had manipulated events so that blame would fall on another, hiding in plain sight while the town and investigators chased shadows. As law enforcement closed in, the depth of the plot became chillingly clear. Every detail of the night, the argument, the sudden violence, even the fleeing figures had been calculated to create confusion and fear. The suspect had studied the routines of the employees, the layout of the parking lot, and the habits of the patrons, ensuring that no one could predict or stop the crime. Even minor acts, such as the placement of vehicles and objects at the scene, had been designed to mislead investigators. It was a meticulous plan that revealed a mind capable of both patience and cruelty. Court proceedings exposed the complexity of the scheme. Prosecutors laid out the sequence of events with precision, illustrating how the suspect had manipulated relationships, fabricated alibis, and concealed evidence. The jury, along with the entire town, watched in disbelief as the careful orchestration of the crime came to light. The former employee's motive was both personal and vindictive, rooted in resentment and a desire for control. The revelation that someone so ordinary could engineer such a violent and elaborate act left the community shaken to its core. Even with the mastermind behind bars, the case left lingering questions. Were there accomplices who had yet to be discovered? Had anyone else unknowingly participated in the plan? Residents of Brooksville began to view their neighbors, friends, and colleagues with a new wariness. The McDonald's, once a symbol of comfort and familiarity, would forever carry the memory of that night, the night that ordinary routines were shattered and hidden darkness came to light. Despite the conviction, Brooksville could not fully forget the chaos that erupted. The story of the McDonald's murder became a cautionary tale about the dangers of secrets, manipulation, and hidden motives. Justice had been served, but the emotional scars lingered, a reminder that violence and deception could strike even in the most ordinary places. The town slowly returned to its routines, but every shadow, every late-night drive, and every crowded parking lot carried a quiet tension, a memory of the night when chaos erupted and the ordinary became deadly.